Good afternoon. All right. So, the details of this podcast on November the 2nd, 2023, for this podcast to be about details. Earlier, I actually heard someone, of course, you hear this a lot. I heard someone online, TV, YouTube, whatever you want to call it. Nowadays, it's all coming from the internet. But they said the devil is in the details, and people are so happy. And we have to come up with something a little bit more, light. But yeah, something other than the devil is in the details. So this podcast, I wanted to go over some details, just about experience, about, myself, marketing, design, whether it's family, coworkers, friends, employers, former employers, or maybe even future employers. But with my experience, there are so many things that I know, and sometimes it's hard to, not using the word regurgitate, but some way of executing or having the projects to implement a lot of your skill, my skill personally, on a lot of projects throughout the years. So sometimes there's just little details that I like to kind of mention, just jokingly, just to see how much of a nerd I am or how much of a nerd I'm not. But, details. And with experience, some of the details throughout experience, it's not easy to obtain by a simple Google search or Bing, or now Chat GPT, Bard AI, which is Google's version of Chat GPT. It's not even, Bing, Microsoft's new version is called some sort of assistant. There's so many of, it came out for free and then everyone put their label on it and then now they're charging. But, I guess for different modifications. But with all of, with that said, with all of technology and, the climate of business, marketing, design, technology, and people, employers, employees, when it comes to experience, details, so much gets lost in the shuffle because, back in the day when you had to, probably way back in the day, you had to handwrite a resume. I kind of had come up in the typewriter, word processing, era of the 90s. So you would, have a word, a printout of your resume. Today, it's just a click. It's kind of, answer a few questions about yourself, and it's the easy way out. And you just click submit, and you have people doing these mass submittals, and they don't really know what job they apply for, as if it really didn't matter. Me, on the other hand, I'm kind of a bit picky, who I work for, because I know how much dedication I'm going to give them. But with, technology, AI, and just people nowadays, there's so much that the employers are not getting because there is so much information that the actual employees are not implementing, mentioning, or they just don't know, or they don't have the skills. So, I'm just going to go over, let's see here, four little just random blocks of details of experience. And there is a difference. It's the difference between someone practicing to play a sport versus them kind of seeing it on TV and kind of going out there and doing it. And even if someone, were that good, say, for example, on the movie Drumline, Nick Cannon's role, he was that good where he could not read the sheet music, but he could play. And that pretty much landed him a nice, spot on a college band where he was playing. And I think he slowly got exposed when he started freestyling, because he went off and diverted, away from what the actual sheet music read. So he was a little bit exposed. So again, you can have someone who can kind of sit in the seat and do a little driving, but when you kind of ask them to punch a few gears, first gear is all they got. So with, my experience of 20, I'll claim my years of after my associate's degree. So 23 years of just obtaining information, working with people, looking at the competition. There's so much in these 4 topics that I'm going to cover are just kind of random pieces, whether it's dealing with imagery, websites, the actual peripherals or emails, and just small blurbs of technology, the details that a lot of these employers may not be aware of because it's not their responsibility to know this stuff. But when they hire someone, they'll either assume that, if something needs to be executed, that these details that I'm going to cover are implemented by the person that they hire. And I feel that this is important, or an important topic, because some of these details I'm seeing people miss. I've seen people, with Instagram following, very popular following, and they kind of post things like, these are the top trends from designers for the year 2023. And it's kind of like, but they have no design background or, a tenure of experience, just of experience and just working with different people, different places, or on different projects. So I'm going to start with number 1. Number 1 that I'm going to start with is FPS. Frank, Paul, Sam. Just the other day, I was actually shocked that I heard a radio ad about some sort of technical school or institute or some sort of training. And in the ad, the advertisement on the radio, of all the things they could cover, they mentioned FPS. And I thought, wow, okay, that rang a bell in my head because I had just worked on a project at my previous employer, and the FPS had come up where the CEO said, an animation was choppy. He didn't know why it was wrong or what was wrong with it, but he just knew that it was not right. And the person that was working on the project, they were not from, here in the U.S., which, that doesn't really play a big part of it. But sometimes these details are taught at institutes that maybe we have, or these just aren't things that some people know. I can hear my dog clankety into the room. You can sit up there. So I was working on a project, and the CEO noticed that it was a little choppy. He didn't really know what was wrong, and he didn't really need to know, the details. But he's assuming that his team that he hires, the subject matter experts, they're going to know about the details in the FPS, which he's unaware at that time. So when I was copied on the email, I looked at it and I thought, man, I've been dealing with, motion graphics for years. And 4 years, not for numerical 4 years. But, I used to work in, Flash when it was owned by Macromedia before Adobe took over. And then I believe 2021 or maybe 2020, I think 2021 is when Flash died. They did a digital burial online. Flash is no longer, an application or a technique, So with my experience in video with Flash back in the day, and even kind of exporting a few, animations from, different software, here recently, I understand the details in the frames per second, the FPS, frames per second. Now, the difference in the FPS, sometimes just to kind of give you a few, to bracket a couple numbers or several numbers, you have 15, which is kind of like, maybe if you open up software, that's the default. There's 30. And then there's a smooth 60. here recently when I had worked on an animation, just a really quick, animated ad, probably under 10 seconds. I used, let's see here, I think I used 30 frames per second because I didn't, with frames per second comes how big the file is going to be. But it's also going to show how smooth the transitions are in your video or your animation. So, the animation that the CEO looked at and our department looked at, it was about, I believe, 15 frames per second. And when you have a 3D rendering, it just looks blocky, choppy. It does not look professional. Now, the person working on the project, different people have different skill sets. Someone could have just started working on animation this year. So nothing against that person, but I was the only person to chime in out of a large thread, to call out the FPS. So the details of experience on that, like I mentioned, 15, 30, and 60 is the difference between blocky and smooth. Once I communicated, a good general rule of thumb of frames per second by using 30, we were actually able to modify the project and create a new video file, which was more smooth. It had more of a smooth transition than the one that the CEO had seen. So that's just kind of like a quick example of details where experience, it matters, it counts. And there's times where you could see what's wrong, but you don't know what to call it. And if you don't know what to call it, you don't know what to even Google or what to, talk to AI. AI may mention it, but it'll probably slide in there to where you wouldn't understand that you have to modify the FPS within the software. So, with AI, and this is 2023, with AI being out there, no one utilized it to find out why the video was choppy. So, of course, and again, real quick note, with frames per second, again, comes the file size. So that same animation, if it were to be like 15 frames per second, the file size, would be, for example, 5 megabytes versus a 60 frame per second video. That's going to be a bigger file. That's going to be a larger file. It would be something like, 10 or 15 megabytes. So with frame per second comes the result of a file size. Number 2, color space. I'll try to be a little bit faster on this one because I wanted this to kind of be some quick tips. I don't want to take too long. It's just, a few random things again. So color space, we have RGB. Ever since some of us, we were kids in the 80s and, we would see that coloring book at the grocery store and it would come with 3 colors. A red, let's see, I think a red, oh man, was it red, green, and blue? I believe it was red, green, and blue. I don't think a yellow came in there because, yeah. So we had a red, a green, and a blue. Now, if I'm mistaken, it just, maybe it's the Mandela effect. If there was a yellow in there, like red, yellow, and blue, so that you use, the yellow and blue to make green. But color space, that's important because when we work on monitors, computer monitors, we're looking at RGB, red, green, blue. When you put them all together, that makes white. So RGB, whenever you hear someone mention RGB, that is specifically what you're looking at on screen. So tip, if you're trying to print something out at like a professional printer, you should not give them an RGB file because that's only light. The colors red, green, and blue. An RGB monitor, light. Now, the contrast of that is CMYK, which is, another word for some of those colors. C for cyan, Y for yellow, M for magenta, which is like a red, and K for black. I was gonna say, yeah, would make sense for B to be black, but K for black, CMYK. That is gonna be used for print. So The details in that would be if someone did not have the experience to understand sending the proper color separated file. That's the difference in your print vendor or facility, or who's ever producing something for you, not having to open up your file, modify it. Hopefully they have a designer or some sort of pre-press engineer on staff to where they could actually correct your files. So when you print, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a CMYK file. That's just another color space. And sometimes if someone's print like doing embroidery, it could be different. Sometimes the software they have could require RGB, but they'll let you know. Okay, I am going to go over file formats. I like this one because I didn't realize how popular, my industry was getting until one day I looked in a hip hop magazine and I saw a print, vendor. At the time it was called JPEG Printing, and it was somewhere down in, I believe, somewhere in Miami. And, I'm looking through this hip hop magazine and then I see JPEG. I'm like, wait a minute. Whoa, wait. This is like designer or, software lingo. So I'm like, man, how do they know what a JPEG is in the hip hop magazine? So then, of course, what follows is the word JPEG being mentioned in music. That's a file format, and I'm going to go over that. JPEG, along with, other things here, more recently what you hear in music are other file formats and different software. So it's just, it's funny how these file formats have become popular over time. Now a JPEG is just one file format for an image. And I'll go over, let's say, a GIF, and it is a GIF, a GIF file. That is another, file format. And then a PNG is a file format, and a BMP. BMP, bitmap, PNG, portable network graphic. Let's see here, GIF, it stands for, I believe, graphic interlated file. I think so, graphic interlated file. And JPEG, which that's a tricky one, Joint Photography Expert Group. I know you're like, wow, you're a super nerd if you know that that's what JPEG stand for. And some of these are, of course, these different file formats are, they serve a certain purpose for each one. Some file formats you want to email real quick and you don't want to, have it rejected out of someone's mailbox because the file is too large. I've seen professionals try to email a 50 megabyte file and it never gets to, the vendor or the, or the other recipient. So that's when you have to understand that maybe you shouldn't send a high-res PDF. Maybe in this instant for, maybe some approval, that's when you send a JPEG. Now, some PDFs can be compressed for email, but you can actually place more information on a PDF file. PNG, BMP, the bitmap file, and the GIF, those are a lot of small files that are mainly used for web. I'll quickly just kind of go over a few video file formats. MP4, let's see here, and then a WMV. And the MP4 that's going to be, oh man, I would have to Google that, but that came out, I believe, like early 2000s. It's kind of like a multi-layer file where it's music and video. And then, of course, the WMV, which I believe is like a Windows Media Video. Those are a couple video file formats. One is probably, I believe, the MP4. Some of these, I guess it depends on how you compress them or save them to where you would like to email them or, kind of save them down. But just different file formats for video. That's something those are details where I'm not even digging deep here. Just, because I would have to kind of like see what are some of the export options and then kind of, scratch my head and say, oh, okay, yeah. And then, go over those. But video file formats, that could be something that you have to watch when you're sending someone videos. Don't just always hit save as, and, not be cognizant of the file format. And then you pass the file on and it's the wrong file format. So we went over image file format examples, a couple quick video file format examples, and then we're going to just say audio. That's kind of like your third one. A few examples of audio files: a WAV, an MP3, which is probably people are more familiar with. And let's see here. I believe there's like an AIF file. I didn't write it down in my notes, but I believe there's probably an AIF file. But these are really just examples to let you know that sometimes the details are important. And if you're, not sure what file format that is most suitable or common that, for whatever application you're working on, just Google it or use some sort of AI. But just note that the file format could play a major role in what you're doing. Now, since I mentioned images and I mentioned screen and print, I'll just kind of quickly say that typically when you're looking on screen or at your phone or a computer monitor, you're going to be looking at 72 ppi. That's low res. Kind of nerd talk, but just, you may hear it now. And maybe it'll become one of those common, words like JPEG or PDF that you're going to hear on the radio now. But 72 ppi or DPI, you're going to hear that. That's kind of like web. And, and when you're printing something, usually about 300 ppi or DPI is what you're going to need. 72 web and on screen. 300 print and production. And PPI stands for pixels per inch, or I think, is it pixels? Yeah, pixels, not points. Pixels per inch. And DPI, dots per inch. Pixel, screen, dots, print. See, that wasn't too bad. Just kind of going over some of those file formats. Of course, some of this stuff may seem nerdy, but you never know who does not have time to do any research, or maybe someone is unaware of what to even look for. Some people just don't care. They just kind of sit down, make it look pretty, make it look good, submit it. But then someone on the back end is doing a lot of cleanup, and someone is paying for that cleanup time. Number 4. So I'm not sure if I even numbered that, but number 3, formats and files, or file formats. Number 3, file formats. Number 4, email. Number 4, email. When we were discussing file formats earlier, whether it be the video files or image files, when you're emailing people, the internet is not some magical portal. Your emails can only send a certain amount of megabytes, so a certain file size. There's a cap, there's a limit. You would have to kind of look. I don't know if maybe your email hosting service has upgraded by now, but sometimes you just have to kind of do your personal research. But there's times where you can send an email and it will feel like it met the other end. It made it to the recipient, and it did not. Now, usually their email server will give you a kickback email saying undelivered. Sometimes it just won't. You never know. And it could be because of that file size. I've went to lunch and celebrated a project well done, and I come back to my desk and I get a phone call. Someone's waiting for the file. And then I look in my outbox and it's stuck in my outbox because of the file size. I guess I must have been hungry that day, rushing for lunch. The file was too large. Now, if you still want to send a large file through email, there are other options you have. It's so funny. I've done this so much to where, our CEO started mentioning it, like mentioning this as it's a common language like JPEG. But, you can use if you want to send a large file via email, your 50 megabyte, your 15 megabyte, or multiple small files where the sum is a little bit larger than what your email server can send. You can use third-party software or a third-party website, and you can obtain a link to that file. They will save your file on the cloud and provide you a link where you can easily paste the link into your email, and you know what? You're going to get that large file delivered. Another option, which this is really popular here. So another popular option that people are utilizing today, are companies or software, Dropbox or Google Drive. Now, these two options are other, kind of cloud services, but with these cloud services, you can actually supply someone with a link and they can have access to, say, an entire folder of images or files or audio. I just kind of, threw images out there. So again, you can go to a website, a third-party website, upload your file. They'll supply you with a link. And a lot of these, companies are free. Or you can utilize a Dropbox software or a Google Drive software. And this would help solve sending large files via email. And the details in that are really, three different formats: your file, a third-party link, or, a Dropbox link or some sort of online cloud folder. And there you have it. 4 tips of just details and experience, things that not everyone would kind of, understand, or, sometimes we're working really fast and we don't think to look at these details, or we're probably not understanding why something is not, working properly. And these are just, 4 random tips I wanted to cover. Hopefully it can help someone. This is an audio, so you don't have to watch it. Or if you're watching it, I'll probably put some good visuals and slides along with this. But again, this is just me with, 23 years of, experience. And I still don't know everything. I'm still learning. Right when I consider myself a guru, AI came out. And to all the real gurus, AI to us means Adobe Illustrator. And if you're a basketball fan, AI, Allen Iverson. A lot of these details were really so that, it's not for, the listener, whether the listener be, a designer, a marketing manager, a CEO. This is pretty much just so that you can kind of hear of something. You never know how a conversation is going to go, or you may have an issue and this may ring a bell. But sometimes this is just to let you know that there's always small detail in just something looking like there's a lot of people, may be accustomed to looking at the finished product, but not understanding, what files or what details to request or submit to achieve that. So again, whether this is a tip for you or if it's just, so that you can kind of at least know a little bit of the language to start the conversation or to point out something, or even, ask a student, a coworker, or an applicant for a job. Or you may want to quiz the person that's working for you to see how much knowledge they understand on this. And sometimes not knowing can be very expensive.